I know some of you want us to collab, and he and I have spoken about collabs, also spoken about just doing reaction videos to each other's videos, and I've actually already recorded some reaction videos. I was calling the series Catching Up with Uncommon. Sometimes he says things that I want to add to. Sometimes he says things that I already recorded, but he publishes ahead of me. I'm like, God damn it. But you can't really avoid that. We think pretty similarly. So I'm going to start releasing this to the members section and just see how that goes. Shaq says he would have joined MJ if he knew it was acceptable. Now, before I even hit play, let me share my immediate thoughts. Shaq, just be you. Why does your behavior need to be based on what others say is acceptable? That's my first thought. And I think that that's a difference between him and MJ. And if they're that different, maybe that wouldn't have worked out. But I'm going to stay on this topic a little bit longer because it's important in case you didn't understand what I'm trying to say. Shaq, just be a competitor. Just try to win the right way in a competitive way instead of trying to win according to whatever level of cheat is currently trending. And the Bulls encouraging Michael Jordan to sit out the rest of his second year so that they could tank and get a higher draft pick, which would have made things easier on Michael in the long run. And him being like, no, that's not what the game is about. I'm playing as soon as I can. That's a difference. How about the fact that even Kobe was disgusted with Shaq's work ethic? You think MJ would have been cool with Shaq's lack of work ethic? And it's not like Shaq was exactly hurting for teammates. It's not like that Orlando team was shitty. I mean, he gave a lot of praise to what it was like being with Penny Hardaway. And ultimately, he left for more money. So that tells you that Shaq's ego was already running the show. And I was really turned off back when that happened and the headlines came out about the amount of money the Lakers were going to pay Shaq. Man, that's a long time ago. What was that, 96? Holy crap, I remember being disgusted back then and thinking, uh-oh. NBA is on its way into the toilet. Let me help you understand how long ago that was and how quickly things have changed. The internet was just something people kind of talked about here and there. I read this news in a newspaper. And I'm pretty sure the headline said Shaq makes a mockery of the NBA with absurd contract. It wasn't praise for these guys always getting max contracts back then. And Shaq had already made a bunch of rap albums and a bunch of movies on the side while making all this money in the NBA. And this is really fresh in his career. And I'm thinking, okay, Shaq's got like 1 foot in the door. Maybe 1.5 feet in the door. I don't think MJ wants that on his team. You know, maybe you want to criticize MJ because he made Space Jam. That's one movie. And he made the studio build him a gym and a practice court and all that stuff. And he never skipped his workouts and he never skipped practices because the guy never slept. So let's not compare that. Anyway, let's listen to Uncommon, and I'll do some reactions on the way. That's a great jam, isn't it? It's so uplifting. And I saw that he wrote it himself. And that's when I contacted him. And I was like, man, how can I get one of those? Now I have one. And it's pretty awesome. It's a different feel, which I think is appropriate because Uncommon is way cheerier than I am.
Like and subscribe on the way in the door, my people. I hope you all are having a truly fantastic day today.
Yeah, I'm never going to say that.
So today we're going to be talking about Shaquille O'Neal made a comment basically saying that if super teams were accepted back in his playing days, he would have just went and joined Mike or some other superstar.
All right, I got a mouth off already. This is maybe why he and I shouldn't do it. It could be good, but I would have shit to say so often that I would interrupt his mind flow, and maybe he would interrupt mine. So maybe reaction videos are better. Who knows? But here's what I have to say about that. And Uncommon will probably address it later in the show. He usually gets around to saying exactly what I was thinking. I think it's a stretch to say that Shaq wasn't on super teams already, personally. That was quite a squad in Orlando. And, of course, the Lakers, you didn't know for sure what Kobe was going to become, but they started making their moves. And in case you guys don't remember, Eddie Jones was nothing to sneeze at. He only got shoved out of the way because of Kobe. In fact, there were TV commercials featuring Eddie Jones. Nick Van Exel. And, did it hurt them that they had Byron Scott, a legendary Laker, a little experience, a little leadership. They have Robert Big Shot Horry, who's already got a couple of championships under his belt. Derek Fisher, who would also be one of the most clutch shooters. Cedric Ceballos, Eldon Campbell. That Eldon Campbell was a fixture on the Lakers for quite some time. He was nothing to sneeze at. I know it's really easy and tempting for people to dismiss these people just because they aren't in the top 75 or whatever the media tells you is worthy of respecting. But that was no scrub team. I've thought about this a lot. I've looked at all those Laker teams during Kobe's years, largely because Scap Attack, while he calls out Kevin Durant and LeBron for being cowards with what they've done, he really overlooks what Kobe had. And I have started several videos on that, analyzing that, and I'm doing it very carefully. I'll release those sometime later on, but I thought I would mention that is coming.
And they were discussing this on Gil's Arena. High-profile member of the CFL. And, of course, Gilbert Arenas' take on it was basically saying, Shaq, well, you couldn't have joined Mike even if you want to. So, basically saying he's not telling the whole truth or whatever. He couldn't have joined Mike if he wanted to because the salary cap wouldn't have allowed, which to me, when Gilbert Arenas does stuff like that, it's like you're missing the whole point of it. But I wanted to make this video because
I actually had a thought before I even clicked play on that, but it's slightly different. Mine wasn't based on the salary cap. It was based on how cheap Jerry Reinsdorf and Jerry Krause were. They barely made any moves at all during Jordan's time there. There was no way they were going to go after a guy who was demanding what at that time you would call a max salary. Shaq setting an NBA record with his contract going over to the Lakers. There's no way that Bulls management is even entertaining those thoughts. Salary cap or no. I also want to acknowledge that I haven't been able to find any clips of Shaq actually on Gil's Arena. So if that was an incorrect assumption, I apologize. So maybe this is just Gilbert Arenas reacting to something Shaq said. But while I was searching, I found that Shaq slept with Gilbert Arenas' wife, and that Shaq's many affairs are well documented. And it reminds me that LeBron fans want to lift up LeBron for not cheating on his wife. Like that's such a high expectation today. I guess it is these days. But you see how these superstars sleeping around and being promiscuous really, really easily gets shoved under the carpet. Because you don't really, or at least I don't hear about Shaq sleeping around that much. And I don't understand these guys sleeping with each other's women. There's a lot of women out there, man. You guys can't fuck outside of your own swimming pool. If being a good family man, if being faithful, etc., are so important in the eyes of the fans, why is someone like Shaq on national television constantly and endorsing so many different products? And this goes for a lot of people that you see being allowed to be commentators now and endorsing products. Stop pretending like we're a moral society. Nobody gives a shit, apparently. So let's just focus on the gameplay and stop pretending.
It seems like a lot of these, well, I understand the younger generation because, again, you want to grow up thinking that the generation of basketball you witnessed was the best. So for the younger generation, I understand that. But what I really can't understand is some of the older generation, like people my age and older, who try to cap for the current generation basically by saying that super teams weren't anything new, or they try to classify the fact that Karl Malone played on the Lakers in his old age, that makes for a super team, when obviously Karl Malone was past his prime.
Okay, part one of that. Yeah, I guess we make excuses for every generation, right? And maybe the newer generation just can't even grasp the concept of competition and wanting to compete against the other greats. And it is weird to hear older generations get influenced by that and start to talk that direction. But I will have to say that 2003-2004 Lakers team was a super team. I think he left out that Gary Payton joined. And I remember very much at the time, because I hated the fucking Lakers, and I was pissed that they got those guys. Karl Malone and Shaq were the two biggest, strongest guys in the entire league. I mean, those two together, that was crazy. Crazy. And yes, I know Ben Wallace was very strong, but he was not as big or strong as Shaq or Karl. And what makes that team dangerous is that Karl Malone and Gary Payton both had been deprived of rings due to Jordan and were hungry for rings. Those guys were willing to do what it took to win. And they did their part. Remember, Shaq and Kobe's egos were hurting the team and causing problems. And Karl and Gary had to just endure that shit. And, Karl got hurt. And that final series could have gone quite differently. Let me share some stats with you. So Malone hurt his knee in a collision against Phoenix 25 games into the season. The record was 20-5 at that time. And he would be out for 11 weeks. When he came back, they went on a 14-4 record to end the season, a 34-9 record with Malone in the lineup. The postseason, he scored 30 points and 13 rebounds in one game against Houston. And then he got hurt again and eventually got sidelined in the finals against Detroit. They did not have him. Check out who else was on that 2003-2004 roster. Brian Russell. Man, I forgot about that. Brian Russell, best known for the shot being shot on him. And also, Ime Udoka. Do they just hand ex-players coaching jobs or what? Oh my God, Horace Grant was on that team. Devian George. I remember Devian George got in trouble for saying he was as athletic as Kobe. Things were never the same for him. But I do remember him having some pretty gnarly dunks. That Lakers team came closer to winning it all than people remember. I'm sorry, Shaq. That is a super team. I mean, you and Kobe alone is pretty unfair. And then you added all that other stuff. You see Shaq's mentality in how many teams he hopped to trying to get another ring after that. And I think a lot of that was just to spite Kobe. He was desperate to have more rings than Kobe. That is not the mentality that would have melded with Michael Jordan.
And I think the biggest thing that they're missing is that a lot of them like to say this. Well, what's the difference between if a GM makes a super team and a player? Well, everything. I think a lot of them is missing the point that choice is the point. You having the choice is the point.
Here we go. Now he's probably going to say what I was already thinking and what I kind of said. Make your own choice. Be strong enough to make the right choice and the brave choice. Not take the easy way out just because someone said, here's the easy way out if you want it. And I would like to think that GMs are in it for the franchise, whereas, at least today, players are in it for themselves, in it for the moment. LeBron's a great example. Sell off all your assets for the next decade in order to lift me into another championship. For now.
And it makes a huge difference. The choice determines your character. The choice determines whether you're going to take the easy way or you want to work for what you get.
You see what I mean? That's about the exact same thought.
Now, of course, we live in a generation where everyone wants to take the easy way. We live in a generation where scamming is looked upon as a good thing. And, the easiest route you can take, people deem that as acceptable. So, yeah, Shaq's point is that it wasn't acceptable back then. It wasn't acceptable. Back then, it was about if you were a superstar, then you were responsible for finding a way to carry your team.
Yeah, except that Shaq's kind of admitting that he didn't have that character. He was just confined by what was acceptable.
To the championship. And then, Gilbert Arenas made a big deal about, well, why didn't he do that in Orlando? But regardless, that's really not the point because he went to the Lakers who did not have a dominant superstar at the time.
Yeah, I guess. But the Lakers also made him a shitload of promises about what they would do for him in order to lure him away. And, Shaq wanted to be in LA instead of Orlando. I'm just pointing out that this is about individualism more than caring about a franchise or building a legacy for a franchise. Yeah, I think Shaq was kind of mentally hindered from the beginning.
And he was a superstar before Kobe, which makes it more understandable that him and Kobe would have some beef simply because Kobe was an alpha and Kobe wanted to do the same thing. Kobe wanted to be the superstar responsible for carrying a franchise to championship. So it makes sense that in that climate, that when that is what was expected of a superstar, that two superstars like that would have clashed.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. Except that Shaq was a different kind of alpha. Shaq, I mean, they both had pretty big egos, and having two alphas on the same team, that's a pretty loaded team. I just don't like the woulda, shoulda, coulda attitude because Shaq clearly benefited massively from having Kobe, and Kobe benefited massively from having Shaq. So we'll never know. And, Michael did it without having a major big time center. Maybe Michael wouldn't have wanted one, or maybe that would have made him even more dominant.
But now let's talk about if Shaq had joined Michael Jordan.
See,
If Shaq had joined Michael Jordan, I don't even think you could put on a number on the amount of championships Shaq would have right now, and especially Michael Jordan, because I feel like Michael Jordan would have had that first three-peat before Shaq even joined. But so here's the difference, what I think would be between Shaq playing with Kobe and Shaq playing with Mike. First of all, Shaq already had a respect for Mike. Shaq already had an admiration for Mike. Michael Jordan was already known as the GOAT, so Shaq would have been coming to the team already knowing that he is not number one.
that's true, but I don't know how long that would have lasted because Shaq is a very egotistical person. And as I mentioned earlier, you saw what he was doing with his career right from the beginning, trying to be a star in multiple platforms. And his ego probably would have gotten even bigger with that success with Mike. Maybe he would have had a in-season Scottie Pippen thing like, oh, Michael's actually holding me back. I'd be an even bigger star if it weren't for being in Michael's shadow.
That's the first thing. Second thing, Gilbert Arenas, like I said, was basically saying that Shaq wouldn't be able to play on the Bulls because the salary cap wouldn't allow it, because Shaq was chasing as much money as possible. Well, Gilbert Arenas, you don't know. Shaq may have been willing to take a much less salary to know that he's about to gain a bunch of championships.
That's an interesting thought for sure. But even taking a pay cut with what Shaq thought he deserved would be too much money for that Bulls organization, I think. And we also have to think about Shaq's ego again. How badly did Shaq want to be in LA for his music and his movies versus going to Chicago? I would have chosen LA. But that's me trying to just enjoy life, not me being someone interested in building a legacy. I don't know.
So I think that was a possibility. So here's the thing. Michael Jordan is 6-0 without a dominant big man.
Here we go. Same thoughts again.
Without a dominant big man. He's had Cartwright and Stacey King and Luke Longley and Will Perdue. And, Chicago has never had a great center or power forward for that matter.
I think about this a lot because of how much burden LeBron's teammates carry for him. And I think you guys will be shocked going back and looking at the numbers of the big men that played with Michael Jordan. I mean, points-wise, they contributed next to nothing. I mean, really, next to nothing. Did they contribute in other ways? Did they fit into a system? Was this all part of the plan? Maybe, sure. But the luxury of having someone else who's going to be the one that gets you 30 plus, or consistent 25 plus a night, the luxury of that and how that might have helped Mike's longevity. It's an interesting one to think about, instead of Mike having to be that person every single time.
So the fact that Michael Jordan is 6-0 with him and Scottie Pippen being the two main guys on the team. Again, defying the conventional wisdom, which is you can't build a championship team around a two guard or around a little man, period. So for him to be 6-0 doing that is amazing. And it is even more amazing because for those of you who want to go research this yourself, I've done another video on this a while ago. But with the exception of Detroit Pistons, but of course you got to count that they were playing football. But with the exception of Detroit Pistons, it was always big men winning before Michael Jordan. When he retired after 93, who won? The Houston Rockets, a big man. And when he retired after 98, who won in 99? And who continued to win?
Let me add to that. It was Olajuwon versus Ewing, and then it was Olajuwon versus Shaq, and then you had the Robinson and Duncan duo. So he's spot on with that.
Teams with big men. After 98, you had San Antonio who won it. Then you had the Shaq and Kobe three-peat that happened. And pretty much it's been all big man winning since, with just a couple of exceptions. So just imagine if Michael Jordan actually had Shaq on his team. Can you imagine the amount of championships they would have won with Michael Jordan and Shaq together? I mean, first of all, teams would be so consumed with Shaq that Michael Jordan, I mean, really it's an impossible situation if you think about it. Because you can't be overly consumed with Shaq because of Michael Jordan, and you can't be overly consumed with Michael Jordan because of Shaq. I mean, it really would be a no-win situation for every other team. I mean, if Shaq had joined the Bulls and Michael Jordan didn't retire after 98, I could easily see them running championships at least into 2003. Because again, Jordan was only rusty coming back to the Wizards because he hadn't been playing basketball. He hadn't been staying in shape, preparing to come back to play basketball. Like he hadn't intended to come back and play basketball. But if he had been playing straight through that time, I could see them easily running championships through 2003, 2004 possibly.
Yeah, maybe. And how can you not think about the lack of validity of LeBron's greatness based on longevity when you think about this? You know, because Mike retiring twice took a toll on his body. Mike having to be the man who carried the team for every season that he did play had to take a toll on the body, which he didn't seem to mind. I'm not sure he would have had it any other way. So it would change how you think about Mike if, in fact, he was willing to have someone maybe close to as dominant as him in a different position, to where everybody's so worried about Shaq. Here's Michael, who you're used to seeing get past a bunch of defenders, now having that wide open lane like LeBron gets to enjoy. I would call that unfair. But why, if Kobe is considered by many to be number 2, some people think he's number 1, if Kobe and Shaq are together, why isn't that unfair? You know, back to claiming Kobe and Shaq weren't on super teams. The two of them together is almost enough of a basis alone to say that they were on super teams, despite anyone else that you stack onto there. I don't know why people don't think about it that way, because if it had been Shaq and Mike, that would have been pretty darn unfair. And Mike's body probably would have been able to hold up longer if he had allowed someone else to carry the burden. But who knows? I don't think, based on Shaq's mentality, I think that there would have been other problems.
So yeah, that would have been something totally ridiculous. Fanboys, which is why superstars shouldn't join other superstars. I mean, that's really the superstars. Again, your competition is the other superstars in the league. As a superstar, you're supposed to be proving that you are capable of carrying a franchise to the championship through not only your skills as a basketball player, but through your skills as a leader. And if you're not winning championships, to me, that means you're lacking in one or the other.
Yeah, or you were unfortunate enough to have to face Jordan, because I feel bad for Barkley. I feel bad for Stockton Malone. But, not everybody gets to win. You compete, and the memory of competing is great. Nowadays, it seems like everybody thinks everyone deserves a title. I don't know. But I think I'm pretty much in agreement with the rest of the show. So if you want to hear the whole thing, by all means, go over to Uncommon Sense page. What do you think? What do you think of this format? Let me know.